Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Welcome, Legacy viewers. Today we are doing a group discussion on Ops Super, which took place on the 13th of March, 1982. And this video will be released on the 13th of March, 2024 on the 42nd anniversary. We've got quite a few veterans of that operation with us today. Welcome all. And if we can start, if Neil Ellis can give us a bit of background from his perspective.
Morning. My name is Neil Ellis. At that stage, if I remember correctly, I was maybe a captain in the Air Force. My task was, as I was a helicopter chief on Dongwa, based at Dongwa. I lived there for 2 years. I was the leader, the helicopter commander of the helicopter formation for the actual Ops Super. That's basically where I come from. What happened, just to give some background, unfortunately, my memory is a little bit hazy for all the detail, but to give some background, the intelligence community had managed to get information that SWAPO was preparing for a major infiltration into northern part of Namibia, using the western part of Namibia through the desert. So we were tasked, well, first of all, recce's were tasked to go and do a reconnaissance of the area to check up to see if there is such a thing as going on. I don't think anybody took that SWAPO would be that serious coming in from the west, because of, we're down in the desert, right in the east, correction, in the west, and it was particularly dry and quite a harsh environment. Anyway, we were tasked around about the 9th or the 10th of March to, we were called in for a briefing that we would have 2 Alouettes and 2 Puma helicopters were deployed to Marienfluss to be in support of the reconnaissance commander. In fact, it was on the 9th. We left on the 9th. The briefing was very short. Basically, we were just told, go and position at Marienfluss. There will be a helicopter administrative brigade, or call it an ops center, recce ops center, stationed at Marienfluss. And all we had to do was just deploy the recce's, stick around for them as support in case something happened, and then we would come back a couple of days later. That was how we got involved. So we were tasked, we got on the briefing, myself, for my second, wingman, shall I say, was Angelo Maranta, and then the Puma commander of the Puma formation was Paula Creer. Unfortunately, he's dead. I cannot remember who the second guy was, the second commander, the second Puma crew. Anyway, we deployed, we flew out to the Marienfluss. When we arrived there, of course, it was pretty barren, and it was quite warm, being in the desert. And there was nothing, there was just a tent. In fact, 2 tents, one for the ops room for the recce guys, and then one for us, the pilots. 3 tents. We arrived at the Marienfluss and had a briefing from, I think it was Fossey, Derek Foster, who was the guy in charge of the recce's at that stage. He was the sort of operations guy. He gave us a briefing, and we were going to deploy the recce team that evening up to the north of Iona, where intelligence had pinpointed, had an idea that the SWAPO base camp was in that area. Nobody knew exactly what was going on. As I said, this was just a pure reconnaissance. Anyway, that evening, we took the recce's up, we deployed them, and on the way back, just a couple of things I remember on the way back, because it was towards the end of the rain season, And what was quite interesting, while we were flying back after deploying them, for the first time in my life, I saw a flash flood. There was a wall of water, maybe of 6 inches to a foot deep, coming down this river line. And when I talk about a river line, I'm talking about maybe a couple of 100 meters across. And there was this wall of water coming down. It's just something that sticks in your mind. Anyway, after we deployed the recce's and we came back and we went back to our camp, where we obviously had a couple of beers and we had a braai, barbecue to those who don't understand South African connotation of a braai. And then after a couple of beers, we went to sleep. But during the braai, around about 9, 10 o'clock that night, we heard an explosion. Now, part of the recce deployment was to put landmines on a road. So we heard an explosion. So obviously something was in the area, and that, of course, excitement was there, because then we knew that there was a possibility of picking up some action. So after the explosion, we calmed down our party and decided it's time for bed. Anyway, the next morning, the recce team came in, said yes, they picked up tracks. There was an explosion and they'd laid another mine on the road, but they were further going to carry on with the reconnaissance to see if they could locate the base. We decided that we would leave them to do their bit, and we needed to go and do some fishing and get some mussels for our supper that night. So we flew in one Puma down to the Kaneni mouth. You know, we decided we could do this because there was not much happening. Anyway, we got to the mouth, we swam in the sea, we collected some mussels, didn't catch any fish. And on the way back, I remember Paul Acrea called me to the front and gave me the headset. And he says, the recce team is in a contact. So, of course, now we've been away. We were supposed to be on standby. We weren't on standby. So we were still about 15, 20 minutes away from our base. So we rushed off. So, of course, Paula pulled for maximum power to get us to the base as soon as possible. On landing, there was great panic on the ground because as Derek had radioed in, said we'd had the recce team at contact. And I think they were maybe about 5 or 6 guys on the recce team, possibly more. But there was around about 30 SWAPO guys that they were coming into contact with. Now, what had happened is that the recce team, of course, they were dressed like SWAPO. They started talking to the SWAPO guys, trying to talk their way out of trouble. But in the end, the SWAPO guys realized there was a bit of a problem, that they were probably South African soldiers. So the fight started. Anyway, when we got to the area, to the contact area, we asked them to throw white phos, which they threw a white phosphorus grenade, which guided us onto target, of course. And then when we got there, we saw the fight was on. So we started shooting. Anyway, we managed, just to cut a long story short, we managed to kill, I think we killed 22 SWAPO, and we captured 6. And then apparently 1 got away. Anyway, what was quite interesting about that whole contact, because we were really unprepared for that contact. The fuel was far away. Well, not that far, but I mean, the fuel was about 15, 20 minutes away. Ammunition, we just had enough ammunition just for support. So we shot off most of the ammunition. And in the end, Angela and I, we'd actually run out of fuel. So we landed on a hill overlooking the contact area, and then I directed the contact from looking down. Now, just to come back, when I say I directed the contact, when during those days, if we could, unlike the Rhodesian Fire Force, the South African helicopter pilots would actually command the troops on the ground. Now we had 3-2 there, and 3-2 troops were on the ground with us, and they were deployed. They were deployed as stopper groups. You know, I managed to deploy them as stopper groups and then guide them onto the fight, and then of course give them close support with a 20mm cannon. After that, we sat on the hill and we killed what we could and captured those who we could, and then returned back to base. Once we got back to base, then we had Derek Foster, and he interrogated the terrorists to try and determine their position.
Peter Williams, welcome. See you've unmuted. Have you got a question there?
I think Neil must just be a bit more descriptive, because he's going very quickly over the subject, like we shot these O's or whatever. Because some of the listeners here don't know what Alouette is. You know what I mean? They don't understand it's a gunship, and just this is not going out to the public. So if you could just explain what a gunship is, what a 20 mil is, just to give a bit of clarity to the story. You know, and you said and then, you know, you shot, I don't know, 23 guys. What happened to the bodies? And, you know, just a little bit more clarity on what was going on.
Okay, all right. Okay, just to go back. First of all, the Alouette gunship was a French helicopter, a very light helicopter, but in the South African and the Rhodesian border wars, we utilized the Alouette as a gunship. It was not only just a command and control area, we used it sometimes as command and control, but its primary task was as a gunship. Now, what we would do, because of the distances involved, we would just have the pilot and the gunner who was also the flight engineer. So the pilot would sit in the front right-hand part of the aircraft. Next to him, we would have the passenger, normally the passenger seat. We would have an ammunition pan of about 350 20 millimeter, if I remember correctly, by 108 size millimeter round. High explosive, we mixed it with a high explosive and with a ball round, normally four HE to one ball. The ball, we use the ball rounds because if a terrorist used to use a tree to hide behind trees, and the ball round would go behind the trees. So there was never really any escape for them. Then the gunner would sit behind the pilot, behind a side-firing MG 151 20 millimeter cannon. And of course, you know, we would do a left-hand orbit, which is ideal for this type of scenario because you look down in the contact area. Most days, particularly today's modern warfare, all the helicopters, apart from the Apaches, dedicated gunships, attack helicopters, but they use forward-firing cannons or forward-firing guns, which is not ideal, particularly in environments, in a bush environment where you cannot see the target. If you have a side-firing weapon, you can get above the target area and you can look down through the trees, see the guys either running around the trees or trying to hide underneath bushes, and then you'd be able to have a clear shot, and then you could kill them. The Alouette itself, because of the load we carried, we had to come down on fuel, and normally we would have half a tank of fuel, just over half a tank of fuel, which would give us around about an hour and a quarter, and if you stretch the bit to an hour and a half flying time. The Alouette is also very slow. We would cruise around about 75 to 80 knots. In other words, so it took time to get to a target, to get to the target, and also if you wanted to go back to your base to refuel, that also took time. The Pumas, of course, was the French helicopter Puma. Normally, we would carry 12 troops in the Puma. It could carry up to 16, if I remember correctly. But we would carry 12 because of weight limitations. It was much faster than the Alouette. So to give you an idea how we used to operate, the Alouette would take off to the target area, and then we would give, the Pumas would give us about 10 to 15 minutes lead time before they would take off. So to try and arrive over the target area at much the same time. Obviously, this depending on the distance, whether it be 10 or 15 minutes. But we would take off before the Pumas. But that also gave us the opportunity to clear the area for dropping off troops and stuff like that. Then also, as another added, asset, we would have a Bosbok or a light aircraft Cessna or a Bosbok that would be airborne, and that would act as what we would call a Telstar. Now, when I refer to the term Telstar, that is to relay communications between a base and the people on the ground, or the Alouette commander. So he could give the TAC HQ an idea of what's going on, give a report, which we relayed back to the headquarters in Oshakati. That was the basic formation of the fire force. If we were attacking a large camp, then we would have the junior space club, or the jet pilots, the jet aircraft like either Mirages or Impalas, to give us ground support. And they would be utilized if we could, for example, anti-aircraft positions 14.5 or 23 mil. Then normally we would request that the ground support aircraft, as I say, either Impalas or Mirages, would come in and either bomb the position or rocket the position. But generally speaking, we developed a tactic on the Alouettes where we could take out the anti-aircraft guns itself. So that is our basic modus operandi. Normally, for deployment of troops, the Alouettes would go over to the target area. There we would identify the target, and then, depending on the terrain, you could determine which way the terrorists or the enemy was going to run. Normally, they would run downhill through the gullies because that's the easiest way of escape. But then sometimes up in Angola, it was a very flat area. It was difficult. You couldn't really determine from the terrain which way would they run. But everybody runs, and once one person starts running, the rest will follow. So then we would deploy stopper groups to ambush the guys running away. And another interesting thing on that technique is that there was always a leader. Well, every army, platoon formation has a leader, commander. And with the SWAPO, and even with up in Rhodesia, with Zanla and Zipra troops, terrorists, if they were involved in a contact, the normal soldier would run one way, and then the commander would run the opposite direction, because normally the commander would have all the documents and the money and whatever, and he didn't want to be caught. So if you saw one guy running off in an opposite direction to the others, then you knew that was the commander. So that was the guy to either capture or kill. That was the basis of how we used our formations. Now, for this deployment to Operation Super, normally all we had on the ground, we had a medic, we had, as I said, short was Derek Foster, the TAC HQ commander, and then he would have a radio operator. So normally about 3 guys, and of course the team that was deployed. We were deployed ourselves, and because this wasn't such a major, we didn't expect much. I acted as the mobile air operations officer in the beginning, and we, that was it. That was our whole complement. But once that fight has started, the initial fight with the Rekis, then that is when the whole everything's escalated, where headquarters in Oshakati deployed 3-2 battalion troops. And if I remember correctly, we were 50 on the ground, around about 50 on the ground with the mortar team. And I think Blackie and Pete might be able to come in with who the actual commanders on the ground were. I can't really remember. But that took a couple of days to happen, to deploy. I'm going to stop here. If you wish, I can carry on giving a background up to the start, and then the other guys can come in and give their sides to the story.
Yeah, I think that'll be great.
Okay, all right. On the 12th, all right, on the 11th, the 10th, if I remember correctly, the 10th is when we had the fight. On the 11th, we started getting extra support, extra troops to come in to because we realized there was a camp there, because what had happened, Derek Foster and those guys and his team had determined there was a SWAPO camp, and I think the combatants that were based in the camp was in the region of about 200 or 300 correctly. We were told there's 14.5, there were 3 14.5s anti-aircraft guns, plus SAM-7s, and they had RPG anti-tank weapons with the normal stuff, 12.7s, PKMs, and AK-7. But now we didn't exactly know where the camp was. Although the 6 guys were able to give us a good idea, we still did not know where the camp was. Now, the ground commander wanted us to attack that day, and we said, no, we can't really attack that day because we don't have enough information. Anyway, he insisted we go for attack. Now, so we wanted to take off in the afternoon, which of course I'm against, and I'll go back on that, because if you want to do a fire force battle, when I say a battle, we're not talking about a couple of guys on the ground, we're talking about a camp with a couple of 100 guys. You need a day. It's a day's operation. If you go in too quickly, you will lose people. So if you go, you've got to take it time, do it properly, methodically, and that can take up to a day. Anyway, so we took off around about 3 or 4 o'clock on the afternoon to go and attack this camp, because the army command on the ground, because we started getting reinforcements, was a little bit worried that we'd lose all the terrorists. And luckily, a rainstorm came up, and I aborted the mission, because we were going to go and look for this camp. And once you start looking for a camp, all the guys on the ground, the SWAPO terrorists will obviously get a warning, and then they will run. So we returned back to base. In the meantime, Oshakati had flown up a major called Henk Kutsia, also Special Forces intelligence guy, wonderful guy, real brute of a man, you know. He was the type of guy that you don't want to meet in the dark of a back alley. Real strong guy, brute guy, but he was quite gentle. But anyway, he interrogated the terrorists. And I never saw him use, I was quite interested to see how he's going to get information out of these guys. First of all, I never saw him strike one guy. The only, if you can call it, use of force on them, he had a big feet. He probably about size 12 boots. All he would do is just put his boot on the foot of the terrorist and talk to them, and just, you know, like him with come into their space by putting his face right next to theirs and say, listen, if you don't talk, something will happen to you, something will bad happen to you. You know, normal stuff that interrogation officers do. So he never physically hurt the guys, but geez, these guys talked. Anyway, Henk used them, and they constructed a model of the area, and then we had a good idea where the camp was. So that was good news. Then, of course, we got logistics to come in. So the Air Force, within, I think, there were less than, say, got informed the night, and that morning, that afternoon, just they flew in an aircraft, a C-130, with fuel and ammunition from Pretoria, which, if you think of it, is quite a logistics exercise. We're talking about a couple of 1,000 kilometers away from Pretoria up to Marienfluss, but the Air Force managed to load up all these fuel drums and ammunition and do an airdrop at the airfield, or the runway, if you can call it a runway, at Marienfluss. So that was one thing. Once that happened, that was good. Then we had all the extra 3-2 guys that came in, Kenny and Pitt, and those guys came in, and with another thing, which made our force up to of about 50. Already we were undermanned, if you think of it, because it was 49 or something. Let's call it 50. 50 guys against 300. It was, you know, when the guys were in a camp, established camp with anti-aircraft fire, but we knew we could do it. So the whole thing was that the attack was delayed after we got that, and we left the next morning. Now, the next morning we took off not at first lights. One thing with these fire force operations, it's never a good thing unless you have to attack at first light because of the shadows. You want to attack when the sun is up, because what happens, the terrorists, they hide underneath the bushes. and you can't really pick them up in the shadow. So once the sun is up and there's a bit of light, then it's a good time to attack. Also, from the information we gathered, is that the terrorists at 8 o'clock they had a parade, and so we decided to time the attack because we'd have light, the sun would be up, and also we might be able to catch him on the parade ground. Well, that was the theory. So we took off. At that stage, we had 7 pumas, five pumas. We had 5 pumas. We had additional 2 alouettes. So the actual gunship force was four alouettes, and we had 5 pumas. 4 pumas to deploy the 3-2 sections or platoons, and then one puma to deploy a mortar team. It was decided that myself and Angela would take off first to go and look for the camp. The other 2 alouettes would come and relieve us once we started flying. Now, when I say relieve us, what we did, we would take off with like we'd always fly in pairs. So we'd have the 2 alouettes would take off and start the contact. Half an hour after initiating the contact, the other 2 alouettes would come and join us, and then that would give us support. So there'd be continuous support for the guys on the ground. And then also, there was be very flexible in that, because if it was a big camp, maybe we'd take off with all of the alouettes, and then they would go back and refuel and wait so we could be relieved. Anyway, we took off. We started looking for the camp. The pumas were orbiting outside the area, so they wouldn't scare the terrorists. And myself, with my flight engineer, Steve Kutsia, we started orbiting the camp, and we couldn't pick these guys up. We knew we were over the area, but we just couldn't pick them up. Angela also couldn't pick them up. But it was also strange because there were like big rocks there, and we didn't understand because the rocks were different. And in the end, old Steve says, those aren't rocks, those are bivvy tents. So all of a sudden, the whole thing just opened up. It was just like, once you identified those are bivvy tents and they're not rocks, then the whole camp just opened up. It's like these sort of eye puzzles or whatever you use, where you identify one thing, and then all of a sudden, everything comes into perspective. And once we saw that there were tents, and you could see that the place was crawling with people, but they weren't moving. They were lying with their heads underneath the bushes. I remember like one bush, it was about 5 or 6 people stuck with their heads against in the bush, and then there was like legs sticking out the bush. It was like a starfish. And also underneath the tents, you could pick up the legs. So now we had the camp, we had the people, and we saw the 14.5 guns, but the 14.5s hadn't started firing at us. I think we'd taken them by surprise, so they thought, if they ignore us, we will go away. But unfortunately, we did pick them up, and luckily, the 14.5s hasn't started shooting. Then I started looking, where am I going to deploy the troops? So because we had time, nobody was fighting. And to get to the pumas to bring in the troops, we got to stopper group positions. So it was all very quite casual. Then the lemmings, the troops, the SWAPO guys started moving. And it's amazing, it's like lemmings. One guy starts moving, all the rest will want to move. So then you could start seeing the pattern of where the escape route, and sort of fitted in with the pattern that we had thought that the escape route will be running down the gullies and the riverines. So everything sort of fitted into our first planning. And we brought in the stopper groups, and then, of course, the firing started. We started shooting, and then all hell broke loose. The 14.5s, I think they launched about 3 SAM-7s at myself. They launched a couple at Angelo. RPGs were going off. It was quite hectic. We started taking rounds, but that's okay. But then the troops are on the ground, and then Kenny and his guys and Pete and those guys started making contact. I don't know if they want to carry on.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a good time to bring Kenny in.
Andrew, my name is Kenneth Swartz. My call sign was Blackie. My story of Op Super, we had just finished our selection at 3-2 Battalion. We had come from infantry school, and they put all the leader group into a white ops, and we went into the bush on Christmas Day to all the hotspots looking for trouble, because they wanted us to get a bit of experience before we took over our platoons and that. So when we came back on the 15th of January, I was seconded to Foxtrot Company. And Foxtrot Company, they had been in the base on bush leave and were ready to troop back into the bush on the 17th of January. So straight from White Ops, we had a couple of days to prepare our troops, not knowing them. We hadn't had them. We didn't know who they were, but we were off to the bush with them to Operation Ops Hansak. After a 7-week bush trip, our 3 companies that were deployed in the bush were rotating, and I was the first to, my company was Foxtrot, was first to be flown into Hurricane Base at Rakwana. So my company commander, they got on the Flossie, and at that stage, I stayed behind with my platoon, Foxtrot 23, as a fire force for the recce's. They were doing an operation. But due to the fact that I was only a second lieutenant, and my corporal Louis Lombard, we never had security clearance. We could not leave because Operation Super, contrary to belief, was a recce operation, which was classified as top secret. So they had to get permission for us to go and join. Okay, Intelligence, Neil's given the briefing about the operation. But then we got clearance. The security clearance came through that we were allowed to go, and we flew into the Marienfluss. And when we landed there was a recce tent with a signaler in, and a couple of guys, and old 44-gallon after drums, and a torn windsock, and there were no trees, no shade, nothing. So we just had to bunk down there and make ourselves comfortable. We were on standby when Neil went on his jolly to the Canary Mouth, the so-called recce that he was meant to do. And a section of mine stayed behind. The others all went on the jolly, and we were ready for fire force. And as Neil said, on their way back, the recce's contacted that I think is Major Kutsia or Captain Kutsia contacted the Pumas and told them that they were going to make contact and we had to be prepared. So I got the orders as the Pumas came in, they refuel, and we get on. And the story to me was that we were going to do hot extraction for the recce's. One Puma was open, and I had a section in one Puma. That was my belief. And when Neil arrived back with the Pumas, we left straight away to go and support the recce's that were going to make contact. On the ground, the Puma landed, and the flight engineer was telling me to get out. And with the noise of the wash of the propellers, you can't really hear. And I was telling him, no, we're doing hot extraction. and he was telling me to get out. So eventually we got out and we went into all-round defense, and the Puma took off, and Neil took over, and he started giving me the brief, what was the story on the ground. And we had Dayglow sewn in our caps, and Neil got us into line, and we started advancing in the direction of the enemy. It wasn't long, we hit contact, and I think Neil said we shot, I was under the impression we shot 14 and captured 6, but it was years ago. Your memory gets a bit lost. So yeah, once after that, they flew in my other section, Louis Lombard, and we cleared the contact area, took the weapons and all the information out of their pockets and their money and whatever we could loot. And then we flew back to Marienfluss, and the captured were handed over for interrogation. We were two, then they did the interrogation. As Neil said, we would have been off target on the base, and they did a sand model, and we got more information and better information, and they wanted us to go in at last night. I think it was 3 o'clock, the H hour, and Neil was against it. And when we took off, we flew into a massive rainstorm. And in the beginning, they thought they would fly over it, but as it happened, they weren't able to, and Neil called the ops off. And if I remember correctly, we still landed because of the rainstorm, waited for it to finish, and then went back to Marienfluss. With the Andrew, with the intelligence, the regional H hour was cancelled, and they decided that H hour would be on, that was Friday the 12th, that Saturday the 13th, H hour would be 8 o'clock. And while at the Marienfluss, there was a shortage of fuel and ammunition, and there was a big scramble to get more fuel and ammunition to the Fluss and more 3-2 troops, because they were still trooping in and the others had gone back. So that's when Peter Burley, he was rerouted. Yeah, then H hour was on the Saturday morning. We had Golf Company and Foxtrot Company. We were the main attack group, and we had a mortar section that was deployed on the top of the hill, which could look into the base. But the mortar section wasn't really effective because of the helicopters flying in the air. But when we arrived on the target area, we were put into a holding area, and we were holding while Neil and they were looking for the base. And then when they found it, contact was made, and they flew us in. And we actually flew over the base, and that's when the hell was let loose. They were shooting at the planes, and RPGs were going off, and they couldn't drop us all in one place. So we got dropped in patches, and when we were dropped, contact was hit straight away, and Neil got us back into formation, got us together, and then we started advancing. And I think Pete must take over now, because they had the first 3-2 guy shot.
Okay, maybe just if anyone's got anything they'd like to ask Kenny at this point in time. If not, then yeah, that's great. Okay. Doesn't seem like anyone wants to ask you.
I think maybe it'll come later. Ask Kenny about why is he still alive. Kenny, why are you still alive?
Neil, that will come much later in the fire, or not much later, it will come in the firefight after the second my corporal was shot, the second casualty.
Oh, okay. Anyway, we'll wait. I will
Okay.
wait.
Pete can take over. Pete can take over because we had started the contact already, and he took his platoon took the first loss. Full Stewart.
Thanks, Kenny. Pete, welcome. Let's hear your story.
Okay, hi guys, good morning. My name is Piet Neetling, and I was fortunate to be involved with Ops Super. And yeah, Kenny and Neil has given us quite a nice summary up to now. When we landed, I will take it from there. After we landed, as Kenneth said, it was quite a big thing to get us all in line, because we were dropped off in different positions, because the area was quite rough and rocky and mountain, you know. And yeah, then we, as we got to on the ground, I mean, we immediately drew fire, and it was quite a thing to get the troops in line. As Kenneth mentioned, they had day-glow suit into our hats, so that was for Neil and the other helicopter pilots. It made it much easier for them to sort of control us and to guide us to the others, because we were all over. And once we got into a line, it was much easier. Still difficult to move forward because you would under fire all the time, and it's if maybe the left flank will get a riverbed, and the other guys were climbing rocks to get over. So it was very difficult and bushy to control your troops and to keep them in line. My lieutenant, JC Kerstein, he was on my right. I was on the far left, and JC was on my right. And then it was Louis Lombard, first Philip Stewart, and then Louis Lombard, and on his far right was Kenneth. So that was the line. And Alpha Company, which I was involved in, was on the left, and Kenneth, whose Foxtrot, was on the right. And then the Peter Purley and Nella, they were stopper groups. And at that stage, they were not there yet. They still had to go and fetch them after the choppers dropped us. They went to fetch them, and they put them onto stopper groups into riverbeds on 2 different places. And yeah, you will hear that story a bit later. So, and then the mortars were flown in, and they were sort of on our 2 o'clock, what's that, northeast, I can't remember. It was quite a higher hill, and that's where they were stationed, the mortars. And yeah, and then yeah, we were fighting our way in and getting in, and the choppers were, if the choppers weren't there, it would have been very difficult for us. I think impossible to fight it, because we were just too few people. And yeah, then the gala was on, and we was fighting. It continued for hours, and I think somewhere in the morning, 10 round about there, my corporal Philip Stewart was shot, and then we were not sure if he was dead. My lieutenant was confused. He sort of didn't, it's difficult to say, yes, the guy's dead. And so then Neil came in, and he landed in that fire, and he took out Philip's body. He was already dead, but we were not sure, as I said. And yeah, and then we continued again for the sort of whole day. And then after that, Kenneth's corporal was killed, also a headshot. And then, yeah, the day continued, I think, around about 2 o'clock that afternoon, maybe a little bit later. Peter and Nella had to move back in because it was sort of over. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there, and then Peter can tell a little bit more about the stopper group, where they were, and then we can take it from there again, if it's good.
Thanks, Pete. Peter, you going to tell us a bit?
You want to tell
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to ask Pete. I mean, I just want to know about Phil. You know, was he in line when he got shot, or you know, where was he shot? And you know, just a little background of what actually happened, because I've heard the story, but I never get told what actually happened with him.
Yes, Peter, Phil was quite close to me at that stage because JC and I at one stage changed. So he was then on the left and I was next to him, and then Phil was on my right-hand side, and he was actually speaking to me. He was telling me, saying something to me, screaming to me. And then when he got up, he basically just looked up, and they shot him right under his left eye, if I remember correctly. And that was it. So that's, yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, when I say I'm talking Golf 26's involvement with Super, is we also deployed late January, did our 8-week stint, and we were on our way for R&R in Buffalo. And when we landed at Ruakana, we heard the story, and here we go with numbers. We heard that the reconnaissance group had walked into a group of 12 SWAPO. They'd shot 9 and captured 3, and no one escaped. So the information that was coming wouldn't have been leaked back. So they needed people in a hurry to go and attack the base that they'd heard about. Nella was very keen on getting involved, so he spoke to Jan Ogaard and said, you know, can we please go? We kitted out, we can go straight away, we're ready. The idea was that perhaps, you know, we'd even be attacking later on that afternoon. Lots of excitement, so we jumped straight on the Puma and we flew out to Murray and Fruus, still with full kit, etc. After the 50-minute odd trip out to Ruakana, we got there, very little info was given to us, but then we were told that, listen, because we are fully kitted, fully ammoed, etc., they needed stopper groups. They decided they weren't attacking then, but they needed to monitor roads to the north and south of the base, because they worried that the base would actually clear out and they needed on-the-line info. So Nella was flown to the north of the base. I was flown to, or when we were told the base, we had no real idea where it was, but we were told, dropped for a point, told to walk west to Whitaker Road, put mines on it and sit there and wait for further information, and please, you know, just give back any noise we hear. So, which is what we did. We went out, spent the evening in the rain, under the impression that we were a kilometer or so from a base of 350. Nella with his 10 people to the north, me with my 10 people to the south, a couple of claymores and our regular firefighting equipment, but with full kit. No bivvies or anything in the night because there were no trees and very little cover, very rocky, freezing cold. We were soaked with rain overnight. And we sat there guard, and all we did is heard a couple of cars to the north somewhere. Really no action, and probably because of all the rain, just nothing happened. It was probably the most miserable evening of my life from a cold point of view. Sitting there waiting for some action, a very funny night. The next morning, we reported that nothing would really happen, and we were told that an attack was about to happen, and we were going to get picked up and put in a position to go and assist with the attack. The helicopters, the Pumas dropped off Alpha and Foxtrot, and then came and picked Nella and myself up. And I was dropped, I'm actually not sure which direction of the base, but we were dropped on a riverbed and told that, you know, the troops, watch out for people coming through the riverbed. You, the stopper group, and the guys are going to come and run in this direction from you, toward you, and just basically monitor the valley in front of you and do what you can. We duly climbed out the Pumas, set up a line on the bank of the riverbed, and within the first 10 minutes, one of my troops fired, Kasinga. And I went running over, you know, what happened? It was a misfire, one single shot. And he said, no, SWAPO. And we said, you know, where? The guy was less than 5 meters from us. He ran straight into us. So that was our first contact for the day, just to wake us up and get us going. The day itself, sitting in that riverbed, wasn't very productive from our point of view. We only had one other person that ran past us, and we had to go and chase him out under a tree somewhere. So we sat and we listened to the firefight, listened to how it all happened. And just going back to the operation and how it was all run, we were flown, I think Jan Hoogaard, Willie Aldane, and a radio operator were also flown out, and they were dropped on a hill somewhere near us, although we couldn't actually see them. Meant to be controlling the fight, but the terrain was up and down, rocky, ravines everywhere, and really the only place you could see anything from was the air. Otherwise, you had a very limited scope where you could actually run to, and you didn't actually know, well, I didn't know where the troops were. You hear banging in a couple of directions, but you weren't sure which way you were going, and my instruction was stick, this is the area you've got to keep safe, and your arc of fire sort of thing is the following, stay there, and await further instructions. I back up what everything has been said about the Air Force and Neil in particular. Yeah, I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them on that day. Because at around 2 o'clock-ish, remember I was dropped off at 8 o'clock, and between 8 and 2, we had 2 contacts, enemy contact in that period, and we really were sitting very still or moving within 500 meters of where we were dropped off, just trying to get view angles and trying to see more, but we could see very little. Because of the hills. So we really just monitored our valley. At 2 o'clock, we were given a direction to move and go over that bridge over there through the saddle, and Nella will be walking to you from the other direction. So we duly put all our kit on and started climbing mountains. And that was certainly a tough physical challenge. From the night before, the cold, the day of tension, and now you're carrying your kit and climbing mountains, also very, very memorable. But as we would go, what was happening is that we encountered a few SWAPO guys ahead of us, and they were all hiding in little rock crevices. And they'd hide there and sit, but as you got that little bit too close to them, that they thought you were about to, suddenly you bing, and you see a piece of rock flying there next to you. And every time that happened, we just went into cover. Neil or one of the Alouettes, please, there's a guy we're being shot at. We're walking in this direction, there we are. And the Alouettes would come and take them out for us. So all we really did is we actually drew the fire, went into cover, and Alouettes came and did the work for us, which, as I say, probably why we're here today, because if we had to take those guys out, they were too entrenched for us to actually get into from the ground while we were moving. And yeah, I think ultimately that is what happened with Nella. He and I were, I reckon, 200 meters apart when he was shot, and we were walking directly to each other. We hadn't seen each other quite yet, but we were getting these little individual fire on us every so often. And on the radio, suddenly Dracula, who was our platoon sergeant, suddenly came and started shouting, "Nella is dead, Nella is dead." And this was just after one of these little ping-ping firefights. We could actually hear Dracula shouting. That's how close we were to each other. I'm talking about apart from on the radio. And we raced over to try and find them. And we got to him within 2 minutes of Nella being shot. I think I was standing next to him. Yeah, Nella had been shot for Papa Whiskey right between the nose. He was about 2 millimeters off the bridge of his nose. It couldn't almost not have been more square in between his eyes. And then he had a couple of shots down his leg as well. Yeah, no way he could have survived, but you look and you try and you're not quite sure, the what, but he certainly, he didn't suffer. They advised me that King Gutu, one of our RPG gunner, had taken out the guy who shot Nella. They actually identified where it came from. So again, this just leads me out my theory about the individual guys shooting at us. And he actually took him out with an RPG, is what they told me. So I then put the troops together. After this day and climbing hills, I mounted Nella's pack on top of mine, and I had a double pack to carry. And we walked a kilometer or two, and then we met up with Fat Dup was actually in command of the fire line at that point. So he joined Pittman, Fat Dup from Alpha. And he was actually running the show. I think when we were told to go in, Jan Hoogaard and then would lifted and actually left the battlefield at that point. I'm not sure if Jan was actually still on there with Wally in the fighting area. We then consolidated, and Dupi said to us, let's just move out and we go and form a TB for the night. We got together, we started chatting, we moved probably another 2 to 3 kilometers, another bit of rock climbing. And then we set up, and the troops eventually could actually calm down and golf. My guys were the only ones who actually had kit and food. All the other Fireforce guys had pretty much Fireforce kit, water, no food, or minimal rations, etc. So we're trying to divide up who can get what and how do we all share the spoils, so to speak. And while we were doing all that, some guy walked into us. When I say some guy, a Swapo guy thought we were one of the Swapo guys, and we'd actually set up base, and he walked into us. And I think it was Dupi who actually shot the guy. Said, "Hey, it's the wrong base. Sorry, mate." And that was the last contact of the day when we were actually in our TV for the night. Yeah, I can go on the next day, but I think because I've gone right through the sort of fight for the day, maybe Pitt and the other guys should come in first again. And then we can tell you the following days later if need be.
Thanks, Peter. I see there are a couple of guys that have just joined us. Leon, I'm not sure who. Ed, how's it? But
How's it,
welcome.
Andrew?
How's it, Leon? Welcome. Yeah, I know you're a bit late, but if there are any questions you'd like to ask Peter Burley about what you've heard, please, guys, do that.
Yeah, if I may, I've got a question already. Peter, did you ever work with Paula Welton?
Yes, very much so. Paula was my platoon commander for 9-10 months, so very closely. We're still good mates.
Fantastic. Yeah, we were actually in a platoon together at the infantry school.
Okay. No, Paula came out. Yeah, we were good mates. We spent a good year. We had our daily stew and many good times in the bush.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And
Yeah,
not so good bush also.
Yeah, absolutely. I put a platoon WhatsApp group together, and he's on that. So we occasionally have our infantry school reunions together. So and I must comment, there's a picture of Frans van Staden, which you'll probably know as well. Francie van Staden, do you know?
Yeah.
He's on the video. He's with us.
Oh, Francie, are you there?
Or he was. Maybe he's left.
Oh, there we are.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I am late, so I apologize. So, and there's one of you, Peter, that I think is absolutely iconic photos, and they'll be the photos of our border war that'll go down for years to come. So, yeah, so credit to you. It's a great photo. In fact, I think there's one or two of you there.
Credit to me because I'm so photogenic. Thank you.
Excellent. Oh, well, if you can hear me, how's it, bud?
Thanks, Leon. Yeah, how do you guys want to go?
Andrew, I can take over.
Okay, thanks, Kenny.
Okay, so after Phil Stewart was shot, we were still in a heavy firefight, winning the fire battle. And the next minute, I got Louis Lombard called me on the radio. One of my section leaders, Joby Zhao, had been shot. And I left my position. I went behind the lines and to see what was going on. And we had been advancing, so we had passed a couple of dead guys already. And as I was coming back to my position, there was a swapu that was leopard crawling towards my machine gunner. So unfortunately, I had to clamp him and carry on. But at that stage, the swapu started gapping at the base in all directions. And the ones that Neil and Angela couldn't contain, they were getting out. So we had to stop and then do a flank attack, take them out, rejoin the line and then move forward. And at one stage, we were moving up to very rugged terrain and rocky outcrops. And we were pinned down for quite a while. We couldn't move because every time we lifted our heads, they gave us a lot of lead. So I called Neil in and come and give us assistance. And he came in and his gunner, Steve, started shooting. And I was saying to Neil, you're going to shoot one of us. You're too close. You're going to kill us. And that's where the story comes in, where Neil, he regrets it to this day that he never got me. I was too good for you, Neil. So, yeah, and then when we advanced a little bit further, about 5 meters further, there were these guys that had been taken out by the 20 mil, had been hit in the head, guys' jaws had disappeared, and we were very grateful to them for coming to support us and getting us out the dwang. And then we slowly progressed forward at a very slow pace. And then Neil can tell you, we wanted to call an airstrike, and we withdrew back, and Neil can take over there.
All right, just to follow up on what Kenny was saying, unfortunately, well, fortunately for Kenny, he was a slim trim bundle of health in those days. But just to give you some sort of idea about Kenny's actually situation, we joke about it, but it was quite serious. First of all, Kenny was pinned down by these guys from what we could see from the air, and they were very close. And I said to my gunner, like Steve says, we can't shoot because the swiper was so close. He says, if I shoot, we're going to hit our own troops. So I said, yeah, but there's two options here. Either we let swiper kill them or we kill them. So, but there's another way. So I maneuvered the helicopter so that when Steve would be shooting, I said, just aim in front of Kenny. I'm talking about 1 meter or 2 meters, because if I remember correctly, these gooks were probably about 5 meters away, which is very close. It's not close. It's tight, 5 to 10 meters. And I said, just aim in front of Kenny, and then the shrapnel, because we were behind Kenny now, the shrapnel, when the round hits the ground, the shrapnel will blow into the swiper positions, which was what happened. We joke about that, but it was a question of either swiper kill Kenny or we kill them. Rather, we kill them than let swiper kill them. But in the end, it worked out and Kenny's still alive. Just to go back to some other instance when you were there, it's amazing that 20 millimeter round was quite amazing. And if we had some incredibly good gunners who knew exactly how to operate that round. For example, when we dropped off the guys in the stopper groups, and sometimes, as came out earlier on, for example, with Nella, and I think even with Kenny, as soon as the Puma's on the ground, those swiper were running towards because they were moving so quickly, and the Puma doesn't land instantly. It takes time to position them, get them there. And by that time, the swiper were right on top of them. And if I remember correctly, around about 50 to 100 meters away, we would be dropping off troops. They would be debussing as a stopper group, and then the swiper was already in sight. So one way of doing it was, because of the rocky ground, you use the rocks like the cliff faces for effectiveness, and you fire into the cliff face above the guys running, so you get that shrapnel effect. And that's what drops a lot. Instead of trying to kill off one at a time, you could wound quite a few. A very effective way of doing things. I also made a mistake early on when I said there were 14.5s. There were no 14.5s. Fortunately for us, there were no 14.5 anti-aircraft guns, but still there was a lot of fire coming up, and we had a lot of SAMs coming to us, and the RPGs were coming thick and fast. The RPG to me is a pretty ineffective weapon against a moving helicopter. But there were so many coming up there, and it's quite disconcerting because, that RPG's got an air burst around about 900 meters from where it is fired. It bursts, and, you'd be focusing on the battle, and the next moment somebody shot an RPG at you, and you've got a big bang and a big black puff of smoke. It's like these World War II movies with the bombers going above Germany, you know, that sort of thing. So it's quite frightening. I can understand why the guys in the World War, you know, those bomber crews, you know, they were brave. You know, when you get a big bang coming off next to you like that, it's quite frightening. Anyway, somebody else can go.
Thanks, Neil. Pete, do you want to give us a bit more?
Yeah, I think between Kenneth and Peter and Neil, I think they've summed everything up nicely. What I can say is that the worst thing the whole day was that the terrain was it's I don't think anybody can describe exactly what it was like, because it wasn't a rugby field. It was very, very rough, and the river slopes and rocks and trees and thick bush that you can't go through, you must go around. But the biggest thing was to keep these troops in a line that you cannot shoot each other. That was the biggest thing. And I think that's where, if the helicopters weren't there, it would have been impossible to fight this fight. Yeah, so somebody else.
If I can come in here, you know, one thing which we learned, and this came out from the Rhodesian War, is that the only way to, you know, because 3-2, you know, in the battle in a bushy area, it's difficult to distinguish own troops from enemy troops. You know, particularly from a helicopter, because we're sitting up there at around about between 6, depending on the fire directed us, between 600 to 1,000 feet. And, you know, you've got a slant range as well. So to pick up a body and identify whether it's own troops or not, because remember, 3-2 were black troops, and the white guys were all, they all had this camouflage, black camouflage. So you couldn't determine whether it's a white guy or a black guy. So what we did is that we asked the troops on the ground, and of course they agreed, but that each would, and their hats, their caps, we would sew in a day glow panel. Now the day glow panel, at least if it's turned, the cap was turned inside out or upside down, whatever you want to call it, then we'd be able to identify who's who in the zoo. So we were able to keep the guys intact quite well, you know, from the air point of view, and direct them onto the target. Another thing, on my helicopter, I used to tape a big day glow panel to the back of the helicopter. The main thing was basically was to, obviously, when you're talking to the troops on the ground, there's about 3 or 4 helicopters flying around, two, could be more. And the guys don't know who they're talking to or who's talking to them. So at least if I had that day glow panel on my helicopter and I'm directing the troops, and I could say, right, you know, move, go left or turn right or whatever, you know, swing right or whatever, then they could say, well, look at me in this direction. So they'll be able to, you know, it'd be easy to get them to move in the direction I want. And then, of course, on a lighter note, the SWAPO always used to shoot at the helicopters. And I had this idea, if you put something like a bright, shiny thing, you know, people like bling, and they like shooting at bling, particularly if it's glinting in the sun. So I put this day glow panel on the back with a theory, what if they shot at the helicopter, then they'd automatically shoot at the day glow panel, and all the rounds will go behind us. That's a really shitty way of looking at life. But, you know, sometimes under fire, you do get desperate and you come up with all kinds of ideas how to stop the enemy from aiming at you. That was just on a lighter note.
I'm a Rhodesian, ex-Rhodesian, and I was invited by Kenny to listen today, and I find it fascinating. I met Kenny through my lady, who's Helen, maiden name Whiteman. Her father was Vic Whiteman, was Commander 1 Squadron on the Hunters, and so I met Kenny through her, and he invited me today to listen, and it's fascinating. I was with BSAP during the Rhodesian War, and eventually seconded through to Special Forces. So I have an interest in this sort of thing, and we're actually going to leave shortly to go to Dickie Fritz, which is today's the RLI get together. So again, have a couple of beers with the boys. So thanks very much, Kenny. I really appreciate the invite today. And it was absolutely fascinating. And this Op Super must have been a hell of a thing. I mean, with enemy 300 gooks in a camp, that's something to behold, taking them on. So thanks very much.
Thanks,
Am I
Mike.
on video or not?
No, your video is not on, but we're hearing you. Yeah, thanks for joining us, Mike.
Thank you.
I think just to add to what Mike said, you know, a lot of the Rhodesian War, I spent a lot of time up there because I went to school in Rhodesia myself. And so the school I went to produced a lot of Flumtree School, a lot of the army guys, particularly RLI commanders and stuff like that. I personally, and I think I talk for all of us, we learned a lot from the Rhodesian War. And in fact, we didn't call it a fire force because we operated in a slightly different way to the Rhodesians. The Rhodesians had an army command in their gunships, but we didn't have an army command in our gunships. The reason being is because firstly, our army guys weren't trained to operate in a fire force role. And then secondly, it was easy, you know, because a lot of the pilots had done fire force. We had done the K-car up in Rhodesia, so we had a good idea of what to do and how to control troops and, you know, just control the forces on the ground and deploy aircraft and things to what to do. So we decided that we would do without an army commander. And so the Air Force commander was the guy controlling the troops, which showed that there was a great trust level between particularly the 3-2 troops and even to a certain extent the Parabats, but we operated mainly with the 3-2 guys. So there was a great trust level that 3-2 would allow a pilot who's never trained with them or had done, a lot of the pilots never did army training as such, allow a pilot to control him on the ground. But all credit to the Rhodesian forces for teaching us on how to operate like that. And you know, the fire force, even today, fire force is not accepted by any, as far as I know, there is no army that uses fire force, and I just don't understand it, because it's for the sort of unconventional warfare. Fire force is the way to go. It's the only thing that will really work in you know, instead of having these Apache gunships taking on a couple of guys and hiding in the rocks. You know, it's not conventional. You need a side-firing weapon like a cannon or like the M24 Gatling, and that came out of the Rhodesian War.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, and I think since I've been with Legacy, which is only just over a year, I've come to see that special relationship between the 3-2 guys and particularly the chopper pilots. It's sort of 40 years later, but they're all very close, aren't they? You know, I went to the 3-2 Recce reunion in the Northern Cape, and then I was at the 75th helicopter reunion, and there's just a very definite special brotherhood between the chopper pilots and the 3-2 guys. Sorry.
The bond, sorry, Andrew, the bond is rum and coke. Now, I meet up with a couple of 3-2 guys. I suppose I should name them, Kenny and Mark, on a regular basis in Johannesburg and, of course, France. And in the end, it becomes, we have to drink rum and coke. Otherwise, you know, we won't be able to last the rest of the day.
Neil got sidetracked a bit. Can you ask him to tell us about the airstrike which was meant to come in and didn't come in? But I just want to mention one more thing. In a firefight like that, both sides are shooting a hell of a lot of ammunition. And I gave the guys, told them that when we go past a fallen Swapo, that we skid him, especially when we were moving through the target, to take all their magazines and stuff them in your shirt. And I took a couple as well, and I changed my magazine, and I had a SWAPO's magazine that was empty. So when you pull the trigger, you just click. And that's a soldier's nightmare when you're in battle and you just hear click. But you learn to change a magazine very quickly and carry on with the fight. But now Neil can tell us about the Sky Jets or the Sky Masters.
That was what happened on that stage. First of all, we had Impalas on standby. If we, if there was, for example, a point on the ground where it was difficult for us to, as the gunships, to get close, or the troops to go and take out the SWAPO, we had a formation of Impalas on standby. And if I remember correctly, they had located, to shorten the distance, they were sitting at Ruakana waiting for a call out. Could have been on Dongwa. Anyway, now the fighting was going quite well. And, we had these guys on standby, these Impalas on standby. I think there were 4 from 4 squadron. And, it's always nice to give people practice, just because we didn't really use the Junior Space Club that often. But we decided, because the battle was going quite well in our favor, we thought we'd call them in. So I called in the Impalas. Now, this was a bit of a problem because, first of all, when Impalas come in, or the Junior Space Club, like the Jets or the Mirages come in, you need to clear the area. And I've had a couple of experiences, but they're dropping bombs or rockets or shooting cannons, and they're fast firing and they don't really see us when they're live in the dive. Anyway, so I called in these Impalas. Now, we're clearing the area. The fight's on the ground, and the guys need ground support from us, but we have to move away to allow for these Impalas to come in. So I've given all the FAC, the forward air controlling, to get them in, all the information. And after about 5 or 10 minutes, there's no strike. There's no call. The Impalas are not coming in. So we wait a bit longer. And then now the guys on the ground are saying, we need help, I need help. But, we need support. But I said, we can't give you support. The Impalas are coming in. Anyway, so after a while, I'll call the Impala formation. I think they're spades or something. I said, where are you? So he says, no, we overhead the area. And I said, but what do you mean you overhead the area? I said, I don't see you. He says, yeah, but you're in the wrong. Then I said, but we're right here. You can see the smoke. I've thrown, the guys on the ground have thrown white fast for you to get there. And then the Impala commander says, but we can't see you. So I said, there's a battle going on. Of course, why do you mean you can't see us? He says, maybe you're in the wrong valley. We're having a major firefight, and there's this Junior Space Club leader telling us we're in the wrong valley. So in other words, it's a figment of our imagination. Anyway, just told him, just go home. And we carried on with the fight. Yeah, it's light part. We're in the wrong valley.
Yeah, as if you could just move to another valley, yeah? How's it, Mark?
Hi, everyone. I've been listening. I just had my camera muted.
Yeah. Did you?
My little participation, I had a wee bit to do with Super in that they plonked us on the runway at Ruakana as backup. And we knew nothing about why we were sitting there. And Keith Dell actually marched past us, turned around and came and said, hello, what the hell are you doing here? And I said, I don't know. We've been told to sit here. And he laughed and he said, he's got a good friend called Neil Ellis who'll maybe come and fetch us. Well, the good friend never came and fetched us. So we had to return to our rum and coke.
Yeah, the reason we didn't want to come and fetch you because we didn't want to share the spoils. We were killing so many people that day. I mean, we needed a tally. Yeah. Look, in general, it was a good day. We was 250 to 300 people. I think we lost a lot of people. I lost a lot of SWAPO. We missed them because there just weren't enough people on the ground. And I think in the end we got I'm not quite sure the figures. We probably got just under. I think the total dead was including the the contact we had with Kenny was right. There were 14 dead and 6 captured. But I think in the total that we got, the total results was, I think the official total is 197 dead with 6 prisoners. You know, we captured 6. So it was a pretty successful operation, which in a sense wasn't, I wouldn't say it was poorly planned, but was totally unexpected. And I think all credit goes to 3-2 Battalion, to the Air Force logistics and even the Army, hierarchy headquarters, to be able to put an operation like that together in such short notice. I mean, when you think of, there was 2 Alouettes, 2 Pumas, it was two sections, or one section of 3-2, and if I remember correctly, is not even 10 special forces that started this off. It really, I think it probably can be said it was an operation. It's a textbook operation.
Yes, Peter.
Which
Okay,
Peter?
Manus. No, Burley, you first.
Yep. A couple of interesting things on the day. The 2 people most eager to be involved with Super were Phil and Nella. They weren't meant to be there. They were aggressively pushing to actually be there on the day. And they were the 2 of our guys taken out. Just an interesting sideline. Was it caution to the wind? Was it bad luck? But both of them shouldn't have been there, but for their own efforts and almost forcing their way in, so to speak, both of them were there on the day, on that fateful day for both of them. So that was one item. The other is after our night we spent on top of the hill there with Tupi. No one had water because we threw our water out because carrying it up and down those hills was terrible. And as much as it had rained, it was dry riverbeds everywhere. And we dug a couple of holes in riverbeds trying to get water, and no such thing. The troops had said to us, no, you're digging in the wrong place. You should be digging sort of halfway up the mountain. And I remember telling them, what do you guys know? You're crazy. Water runs down, doesn't go up. And they said, come look. And they went halfway up the hill, and we dug a hole over there, and there was water. We got a water supply. Just how they knew that bush, and they'd never been there before, but they said that's where the water runs in these type of valleys. And that was quite amazing to me. The morning following the battle, so we're now on to the 13th, the morning of the 14th, Alpha and Foxtrot didn't have kit. Golf was the only one without kit, as I mentioned earlier. So they were flown out, and I was left behind now with my 21 troops to keep the area safe, and just to, we can wait until the helicopters are ready to pick us up again. When the helicopters came back, they were full with generals and press and everybody, and that's where the photos of me actually came out. And the general climbed off with Jan Hoogaard, and they walked over to me and said, please show them, you're going to show the guys around. But if anybody ever talks to you, you tell them we got 201 died over here. We killed 201 for the day. So I was like, okay, if that's battalion, they said that's a psychological number. We've got to get more than 200. And that 201 number is widely printed in the newspapers. I've got a few of them still in my office. But there was never a body count because the area, the battlefield was actually just way too big to actually count. And there were guys in crevices all over the place. And 80% of them were probably taken out from the air. So the official figure, as I understood it, was 201 for 3. So again, Neil, memory of the 197 versus 201, we're close, but that's my recollection of it. And what else was interesting? I spent one more day, and they pulled me out and we went back to Buffalo. So actually, one other query was just the recommendations for the battle. I was always curious how that was actually allocated and done, because nobody ever spoke to any of us. It seemed to be done from an outside, and I'm very curious to know how it all happened, and nobody's ever been able to tell me. Open question.
To the best, Peter, to the best of my knowledge, all the commendations of the battle came from 3-2. I know the Air Force never put me up for my effort, or everything came out of the 3-2, and I think I was talking under correction, but I think it was who was the commander then? Ferreira. I think Colonel Ferreira. I think everything came out of him.
Daniel, yeah, I think you deserved it on the day. As I say, no guarantees in this war, but the chances of me sitting here today are very much thanks to you being there that day. I probably wouldn't have been here otherwise.
You still haven't paid me.
You can visit me anywhere. I've got Ramya in Australia.
That's a good invitation.
Fly over anytime.
Mooi.
But yeah, I was surprised there was no debrief or no questioning of of me in particular. Yeah, we've never had these kind of discussions. What happened? What was your experience? How did for educational purposes, you need some sort of a debrief and learn and develop from it, which I felt was a little bit lacking.
Thanks, Peter. Peter Williams, you want to have a say?
I just want to say a couple of years after this, I think 1984, we captured a guy in Obsa Scurry, and he was quite a senior. He was like a deputy. He was the Northern Detachment Commander, second in command. And I had a couple of hours to chat to him and so on. And he was at Ob Super. And basically, they were starting up this new front, and they'd done training, and they were all ready to go, almost like infantry school troops that were going to the border on a mission or something, And he says they were all very positive and all geared up. And he said it was just a total nightmare because they hadn't even got to opening their camp up. The equipment was all there, but they didn't get the opportunity to, put their 14.5s out or anything. They were still en route, slowly getting there and developing their camp. And a funny thing happened when he was with us. We had some gunships come in as well. And he started shaking. And I said, wow, what's the matter with you? And he said to me, no, whenever he hears those aeroplanes, he has this involuntary muscular reaction where he starts shaking. So years and years later, the impact of war and PTSD affected those guys, I think, more than what it affected us, because I think they were on the receiving end, whereas when we heard the Alouette, it gave us a little bit of vava voom, and we were ready to go because we knew the gunships were protecting our lives. Then another little story was, I wasn't at Ops Protea, although in Piet Nokier's book, he mentions that I was in one of the stopper groups. I was never actually there. I was enjoying myself at infantry school on mortar course at the time. And we used to fly back from Whitaker Airport back to Rundu. And Gary Nettle and myself were together. And one of the liaison officers, a lady lieutenant, came to us and asked us, are we these two guys? We said, yeah. She said, unfortunately, you guys can't fly back because there's a signal that's come from Eddie Viljoen, and we have to stay behind for a week, and we're going to attend Phil Smith's funeral. And we knew Phil Stewart, sorry, not Phil Smith. And so we found out it was in the Kempton Park area we had to go to. And we didn't have anything fancy with us. We just had our berets and our bronze, and, and we attended this funeral. And it was a real Afrikaans type of affair where there was a church. And we went, after the church, there was tea and cakes. And some guys came to us and asked us if we knew Phil. And we said we did. And, that normal interaction. And then we were saying our goodbyes and condolences and so on. And then his stepfather said to us, no, there's like a wake that we have to go to. And we followed them and we went to the wake. And the wake was another group of old tunnies from the church and, elderly family members of his. And it was very stiff and upper lip and, that kind of thing, and more tea and cakes and whatever. And Gary and myself thought, well, we can hit the town of Joburg and have a good time. And we obviously went to his stepfather and we said, look, we have to get out of here. You know, we got other things to do and so on. So I said, no, you guys are going nowhere. You stay right here. He said, it's about another half an hour. After half an hour, everything cleared up and he said, okay, you two must help us now. We're going to the servants' quarters. We went to the servants' quarters. There were these sink baths with ice in. And I don't lie to you, there must have been like 20 cases of beer. There was brandy, there was rum, there was everything there that you could wish for. And some of Phil's schoolmates started arriving. I don't know why they weren't at the funeral, but they arrived there. And we started a party there, okay. And then Gary took over the hi-fi and he started playing. I remember he played Phil Collins a lot. And there was dancing and jawling and whatever. But the end of that story is, I tell Gary says to me, he thinks, nah, we lekker fris and we up with the rum and cokes and we really going. He reckons now we're going to hit Joburg. We're going to go to a place called Benanapoli in Hillbrow, he thinks. I said to him, you know what time it is? He said, yeah, 10, 11 o'clock. I said, no, it's nearly sunrise. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. So we staggered out of this, pissed as coots, but that was the beginning of my my first funeral with 3-2. And after that, I've attended a couple of funerals, and I'll tell you, a 3-2 funeral or wake is something not to be missed because the guys let it all out.
Thanks, Peter. I also had a message from a guy, Jeff Oosthuizen, who was at 5 Signals in Grootfontein, to say that he's got some interesting information on this operation, but he's not able to attend today. So I've asked him to send me a video clip giving me that info, which I'd then add into this video.
Okay, so I have received a written submission from Jeff Oosthuizen, and I will read it in and put it into this video as well. Here goes. I'm Jeff Oosthuizen, a past member of 5-4 Signal Squadron, which was a citizen force squadron of 5 Signal Regiment. I was at 511 troop based in Grootfontein. To make myself understandable, a brief reference to planned annual march. Previously, they also were able to cross into Southwest Africa from Angola in the east, but our forces had contained that area, and hence their attempted crossing was limited in what is considered the central area, that is the area of Umberland above the area of operations of Sector 10 in Oshakati. Now back to 511 troop. They monitored the radio nets of Plan and FAPLA together with their relevant DF stations. The national serviceman did a 4-hour shift and was then relieved. It was rather taxing to sit down and do what they did with earphone and the like to take down the messages of Plan, which were all in Morse code. At the end of the day, Plan would sign off, and that was the end of the working day for us as well. The OC and the Troop Sergeant Major would go home around 16:30, whereafter the troops would retire to their pub for whatever pleased them. Now please forget the timeline and Op Super, there was nothing. On a certain afternoon, some of them went into the building where they worked, as it was air-conditioned, and Grootfontein was also hot during the summer. One of them, name withheld, sat on a chair at a workstation called the search task, Soektaak, where normally one would sit and search the HF spectrum looking for new unknown enemy transmissions used by the enemy. While sitting there chatting, he flicked through the frequencies and a station transmitting Morse drew his attention. He took a pen and realized the method of operating the Morse key was a Plan operator who was known on the Plan net where he worked daily. They recorded the new frequency and started to monitor the messages being sent, and at the same time alerted the DF station to plot where the transmissions were sent from. They soon plotted the origin on their wall maps and found the source to be way to the west in Angola, close to the border with Southwest Africa. However, the maps we used, all of us, were drawn from photos taken by the Air Force and did not reflect much detail. Now this is where it gets interesting. This info was relayed to the SO1 at Sector 10. His first initial comment was, "Julle praat kak, julle weet nie wat julle doen." Something I must add. The national servicemen were very diligent and fully aware of the task performed, and if you wanted to create a storm in a teacup, tell them they did not know what they were doing. What follows now was the key to resolve what they discovered. 511 Troop was a Portuguese map of the area where the plan messages originated. It was in colour and pasted onto a warped piece of hardboard and probably left behind by the Portuguese when they had to flee during 1975. In some way or another, they were able to plot the planned transmissions onto this old map. But on this map where they made the plot of the transmission, there was a pick and shovel, which in the legend of maps depicts a minefield. Armed with this information, they again confronted the SO1 at Sector 10, who was then obliged to drive to Grootfontein and witness what I've detailed above. He subsequently had no alternative but to agree to send a small team of special forces to the area, and that was the start of Op Super. Thank you, Jeff.
Kenny, do you want to say something first?
Peter, if I can, I just want to mention also coming back to the ops, that all the tech guys, all the guys that were there had never worked with each other. We didn't even know each other. And we managed to pull it off. And another thing, just coming back to Peter's story about the recognition, in my eyes, every single 3-2 soldier in that operation and the guys that were there deserve a Norris Crooks, because that wasn't kids' play. That was real war.
Kenny, I agree with you totally. But 3-2, it was a rough and tough unit. And I think that we were way behind on the personnel functions of handing out medals and stuff like that. I mean, we had one guy that was the purse officer for all the troops, and we had like 1,000 troops. And that was Sergeant Major Rosa. And I think that we just didn't have our stuff together on the admin and log and, you know, that kind of thing. And I remember going to the recce wing, I was told emphatically by Willem Rutter that if I'm into the rum and coke gang or I'm interested in getting medals like Udi Morphy, that I was definitely not in the right organization. So they were very anti medals in general. And I think it's only with Obs Hooper and Packer and towards the end, Modular, that the guys were getting recognition. But I agree totally with you. I think Ob Super was even more hair-raising than Ob Savati, because, I mean, the terrain was totally different. It was open. And I think one of the lessons learned, like Peter Burley said, we never ever did a debrief, or there wasn't lessons learned, and we didn't pass information on from one operation to another operation, was the fact that the 3-2s had the ability to work together. They had very good comms with their black guys. They had good radio comms. But when it came to writing citations for other people, that just didn't take place.
Andrew, can I just reply to Peter? Yeah, that Falcon, he told us one day, this is your job. You're here because you want to be here. It's your job. No medals for you guys.
Yeah, just for the record, my two guys, Dracula and Kingutu, were both awarded the H3 for Super. So the accommodation did go through. Yeah, someone did the paperwork, but no one actually queried how they chose those two. I'm unsure.
Yes, Neil.
Can I come in?
Yeah,
To
come
answer
in.
Peter, if I remember correctly, Dracula was the guy, when Nella was killed, Dracula was the guy that ran out and dragged him back to the lines, or got him to call it, if you call it, safety. And I think that's where Dracula got his medal, because he under heavy fire.
Yeah, I think the official version. I think that's the official version.
Oh.
I'd like to know where that official version came from, because Dracula, yeah, there were 10 troops on their own. I was the closest person to them. I was the first person on site. Nella hadn't been dragged anywhere. Yeah, there are a lot of questions about it. But certainly I agree with everyone else, and I think you should have been awarded an HE for that day. It was very much thanks to you and everybody there. Same thing. I agree with all of that.
Okay, well, anyway, maybe it was just a black face. That's it.
Pete,
We
Peter,
were
think
stopped
the
by
person-
one verse then. Sorry, Kenny.
Peter, I think because I've got a commendation and so did Louis. But I think it was put in by Jan Hougaard, all those citations.
Okay. Now, look, there must have been an admin system that went around it. Really academic.
It was, that was Jan Super's doing.
Okay, good.
If I can back up what Peter Williams said, Willem Rutter said the same thing to us. He said, listen, Oaks and medals, you've got a job to do. That was it.
Thanks.
I would like to add something, if I can, Andrew.
Oh, Frans.
And that is from a totally different side. Sorry, I had to drop off and come back. So, Piet Neethling, if you take offense to what I'm going to say, then we can edit this out. So I had the privilege after our selection to be tasked to go to Rundu for a month as assistant adj. And then when the adj arrived, I asked to go back to the companies. And I spent the first months, January and February of 1982, with Alpha Company as a sparpeel, as they called us, Alpha 4, JC Castaigne. And Piet Neethling here was one of my mentors during that time. I recall at some stage we stayed behind when everybody went on leave after the retraining. And Piet and I had to manage things. He managed things and I learned from him. So 4 days before Operation Super, Major Bula Niemann arrived at Alpha Company's Gross houses. And he called me and everybody gathered around him. And he said to me, Frans, we need you in Delta Company. At that stage, Delta had a change of leadership and they needed a leader group there. So 4 days before Super, we trooped for Super. I moved to Delta. And we then were at Ruacana Airport when the battle occurred. And my mates, Piet, Phil Stewart, Fedup, all of them were in the fight, JC Castaigne and so on. And I was excluded. And that was quite a difficult time. I also want to tell the story of the wrong identification of the soldiers. When we lost Phil Stewart, the body bag was transported by Puma to the airport, but there was misidentification. We were told that we were Piet, you passed away, and it was we carried the body bag, and only later, towards that evening, were we actually told that we carried Paul Stewart's body bag. So there was huge confusion on our side as well, not knowing exactly what happened. And only towards the evening did we get an idea of what was happening. At some stage, one of the Pumas landed and we had to drop all our full magazines into RPG cases and send that in. I don't know whether it was ever used, but at least we got our magazines back at some stage. So yeah, Piet, I think you, Blackie, Nellis, and Peter Billy, yeah, I agree that was, I think, a massive contact on the day, and you had to make do with what you had on the ground. So I think accommodations broadly were in order. Lucky, I'm glad you did get something for that, but I agree with you that it should have been applied broadly. So thank you for that opportunity. Pieter, ek hoop nie jy gee om dat ek nou jou naam nie uitlig nie.
Seems happy. He's given a thumbs up. Anyone else want to say anything? Ask anything? If not, I think maybe it's a good time. It's been quite a long session. Just for your information, the video will be released by Legacy on the 13th of March to commemorate the anniversary of the battle. Yeah, and thanks Neil Ellis, Kenny Schwartz, Peter Burley, Peter Netlin for giving your accounts, and for the rest for joining us. Quite a big team here today. Mark Hansen, Frans van Staden, Peter Williams, Mark Powell, Leon De Bruin. I hope I've got everyone. If I've missed anyone, apologies. Yeah, thank you guys. And for the Legacy viewers out there, thanks for watching, and until we meet again.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.